Hello, I'm Bob, and welcome to part 2 of this series on leaps and jumps at the piano. So I'll get straight to it because the last episode was quite long. So first of all, it's important to experiment physically with everything that you're doing. So some of this is still going to basically have its roots in what we were talking about in the previous part 1. Part 1 was mostly the psychological stuff, the stuff that there's no point learning all of this physical technical stuff unless you've got some of the psychological stuff in place. Go watch that video for more information. But basically, what I see a lot of my students do wrong, let's say that, like in the last video, let's say I want to make this jump, which is not a jump I've really practiced other than in that video, going in my left hand from middle C down to C at the bottom of the piano. Let's say that I want to practice this. What I see a lot of my students do, this is not good, and I think most of you, if you're honest, you probably do this. You're reading the sheet music, it says C to C, and so basically what you do, you don't really feel your arm, you don't feel your hand, you don't feel your fingers, maybe not even really thinking about physically how you do it. You just think, I want this note and I want this note. And you'll just do it again and again and again. Now, I just can't turn it off. I cannot turn off feeling what my hand is feeling. It naturally adjusts and feels. So it's hard for me to even think, how would I get into the state that most of my students would be in? There would be tension, because tension is like the state of not feeling what's going on. So there would be some element of tension. The wrist would be very, very stiff and tense. Yeah, I think that the wrist is basically just unyielding, unmoving. There's a firmness to it. And this is what happens when we are overly mentally focused on something. Everything just gets tense. The wrist doesn't rotate. It's not loose. So the wrist is just locked in a position like this. And there will just be a sense of trying to get it over and over again. Actually, that's not bad. But you don't want to play like that. That's very unpleasant. And most people probably won't stretch their hand either. It will just literally be this instead of stretching out. So what we want, like I said in the last video, we've got all these different ways of moving. And let me just break some of these down properly. We have 2 distal joints on each finger, distal furthest away from the core of your body. So we've got the joint in the finger nearest the fingernail, that can move. We've got then the next joint that's further away from the fingertip, that can move. And generally, I suggest to most people that we actually don't want those joints to move. But when we're practicing, maybe we practice moving with those joints. Then we've got the metacarpal joints, and the metacarpal joint is like the knuckle joint where the finger meets the hand. In the little finger, it's basically here. That joint there is your metacarpal. Your thumb is exactly the same. You've got a joint nearest the fingertip, another joint, and then the metacarpal is almost where it meets the wrist. So a little different to the other fingers, but it still has those same number of joints. And not only that, but each finger actually moves sideways. That's something as well that a lot of people don't think about when they stretch, that when you stretch, actually your fingers might want to do that little bit of a stretch sideways. I'm willing to bet that most amateur pianists will never even be aware that their fingers can go sideways in this kind of way. So that's a useful one as well. The thumbs are a bit more different because that's really sort of more... No. This is the usual way that your thumb would move like this. In the same way that your metacarpal joint moves there in the finger, but it can also move sideways. So you want to explore all these motions, and the thumb, it can sort of rotate in not 360, but it's basically, it rotates in all these kinds of ways. Your fingers kind of do that as well. Then you've got your wrist, and your wrist does this motion. It does this motion, and it rotates. Now, really, it's not actually the wrist that's rotating, it's actually the forearm from the elbow. But to me, it's easier to conceptualize it that the wrist is rotating, because when the wrist locks up, like I was saying before, like a lot of my students will just move like this, where the wrist is solid. It feels like the tension is in the wrist. That's where it feels. So not only that, we've got all the different motions of the elbow. The elbow goes in all kinds of different directions. It goes up and down, goes sideways, the whole combination of those. But then also our shoulders, not only just sort of let us do, up and down, and like a chicken wing, but they also do subtle things like expanding away from you, contracting in. They're quite sophisticated joints. There's a lot going on there. And then, there's the neck, there's the torso, there's our feet, there's our whole bodies. And when we start to make this jump, the jump, like for example, I'll probably use my feet a little bit, and when I sit on the bench, I sit on my sitting bones, perched on the end, right on the edge of the stool, as if I'm sitting on a really high kitchen stool. Because what that does, when I need to move around the piano, I'm not just like a lump. I'm not like a lump sitting back on my thighs. But if I'm sat perched right on the edge of the stool, I've got a sense of mobility. And as I move around, it's the weight on my feet that helps me to move around. So for example, if I'm leaning to my left-hand side and I need to quickly get to my right-hand side, I'm here, I'm leaning like on my left buttock, my left sitting bone. If I want to get to the right, what I need to do is feel the weight of my left foot on the ground and push against it to push me to the right. And, most of the time I don't really think about this, but I know how my whole body feels, and it's intuitive, but it comes with like a natural awareness of how everything feels. If I'm not interoceptive, like I was talking about in the last video, I'm never going to do those things naturally. Everything will just become, like robotic and mechanical. So as I do this kind of jump, my wrist will probably start to do a little bit of rotating, something that looks a little bit like this, a little bit of rotation. I'll probably start to do an arc away from the keyboard, which starts to involve the sort of movement of my forearm from the elbow. I'll probably start sort of expanding my shoulder joint away from me a little bit. I might lean into it, I might not. I also need to be aware of what my neck muscles are doing as I kind of use my eyes to look. There's so much going on. Like I said, I might want to expand my hand, but then I might also want to experiment. Well, what if I don't do all of those things? What's it like if actually I don't move my hand open and I do it without that? Let me experiment and see what that's like. What's it like if I jump and I just hug the keys and I don't move away? I basically experiment with all of these until you find the combination of movements that just clicks and makes you go, that feels easy, that feels good. And, I want to emphasize as well, it's not necessarily, there's a difference between the thing that clicks because it feels very physically comfortable and easy, and what is just a habit, because a lot of people confuse habit with good technique, because they think that because it's habitual, because it's a habit, that feels natural. But really, it's not. It's just like something that feels awkward that they think is natural because it's a habit. I'm going to have to talk about that another time because I don't want to end up going down the rabbit hole into that. But anyway, super, super important. Point number one, basically being experiment. You want to experiment with all the possible movements. Experiment as much as you can. Don't just get locked into just over and over the same movement, exactly the same sound, everything non-changing. Good practice is about constant experimentation, constant changing this, change that, until you just find the thing that works. So, like I said, good technique is the laziest way to get the sound that you want. And I said that in the last one. Now, being lazy is not just going with what is habit, because as human beings, we are all wired that we all hate changing habits. That's what habits are. It wouldn't be called a habit if it wasn't difficult to change. The habits are literally things that we don't really want to change. Now, being lazy in a way might just be like, I'm just not going to change that habit because that just feels most natural. No, you have to constantly test what is habit, what is unhelpful. Let me try experimenting with different things. And that's the point of practice. Actual proper practice is about the changing of habits from unhelpful habits into better habits. And really, that is one of the deepest, most profound things that I can say as a music teacher. If you want to discover how to become an amazing pianist in the shortest amount of time, in the most effective way, really what you want to be focusing on is changing your habits to the most useful, healthy habits. And no one likes changing habits. That's why it's practice. That's why learning an instrument is difficult, because we're always changing habits. But after a while, see, like most of the practice that I do, I try and make my practice feel easy and effortless. You have to make friends with the fact that everything you do is changing habit. Once you befriend the fact that what you are doing is changing habits, and you get used to that, then it's easy. Then everything clicks into place. So yeah, I can't emphasize how important that is. Now, in one of my previous videos, I think was it the first YouTube video that I did in the things that amateurs get wrong the most. Every time we do a jump, it's very, very, very common that people will jab the first note. So just to illustrate this same jump that I'm illustrating over and over, what so many people are going to do, to get from the first note, they're going to jab. They're going to jab. And I used this analogy before in that video, and I'm going to leave a link to that video above and in the description below. In the description below are going to be links to everything that I mentioned in passing. So let's say that we do something like, and I'm just adding a couple of notes before it, because what we don't want, and that's what most people are going to do, jab, jump. And the jabbing, so I used this analogy in the last video. It's like pushing yourself out of a swimming pool. You're like, or it's like you're springboarding, or like you're going off a diving board into a pool, but maybe not as many people do that. But what you're doing is like you push down to go up. It's like, I'm here, I want to go here, so I'm going to push down to push my hand up and go there. No, we really don't want to do that most of the time. Really what we do, and again, I don't want to go into it too much, but in the other video I talk about this a lot, that the way we want to practice this is we play gently with the thumb, without any thinking about where we're going. Then we lift from the wrist and pull our finger reluctantly away and jump down. So it's not push down to go up, down, or but it's just we play, lift up, go down. Now this is especially important in the piece like I was demonstrating with the Chopin Nocturne last time, and so many people will do this. Now, I'm exaggerating, but not much. So if I just show you in the left hand, there'll be a push down to go here, and especially a push down to go there, and then a push down to go there, push down to go there, push down to go there. Now, if you play any Chopin or any left-hand piece where you've got jumps, record yourself, because I bet you that you don't even realize that you're doing this. You think you're doing this. That's what you hear in your head, but actually if you listen back to it, it'll be oops. And one of the reasons for this, I talk about it in the other video, something called an attentional blink. Most people, most amateurs, when they're here, they play this note, but they're thinking about where they're going. They're thinking they want to get down to the C flat down here, so they'll play this without even listening to it, because all their attention is where they're about to go. So anyway, go watch the other video for information about that. This is so important. So basically that was like the second point. Do not jab the note that you're jumping from. Very common problem. Now, another thing that I think I see so many of my students do this, and I guess this has been drummed into them from trying to play scales correctly, playing scales well. And this is that, say we play a scale, with a flat. Let's, I don't know, say it's F major. And everyone is taught that we put the fingertip, we have nice curled, naturally curled fingers, not like tense, claws, but we have naturally relaxed sort of curved fingers that go on the fingertips. And when that finger goes on any note, whether it's a white note or a black note, you've got a nice curved finger. The fingertip goes nicely on the black note. And that is the way we want to play scales. Now, when it comes to jumps, let's say that I want to get down to the E flat, a black note, from this part of the piano to this part of the piano. I think a lot of people then jump down and try and land on the tip of their little finger. Don't do that. It's unnecessarily difficult. I mean, I'll get to this in a minute, but usually the way that I play, with a few exceptions, what I do, let's say, because it's difficult for you, obviously, to see what I'm doing on the piano. Let's say that this is E flat. This is the black note. So it's like, here's E flat, here's the note. Let's say this is physically the key. And when my finger lands on it, it's going to look something like that. I'll hold it from here. Here's the key. I'm going to land like this. Now, not so much that I then, let's say you've got the two black notes next to each other. So here's D flat, here's E flat. They're about that much apart. Yes, just so if I land like that, on the E flat, this is E flat, this is D flat, I want this one, I can land like this, and I just can't miss. So I'm jumping from here, and I jump down, I just can't miss. And this is another reason to not just move down lazily with your whole hand, because this is much harder to get than if you stretch out and land with your little finger diagonally. You just can't miss. And notice I'm not right on the tip, but here I'm just a little bit in. I just can't miss it. So I don't know how well you can see it from there, but it literally looks like that on the key. I just can't miss. Now, there are the occasional times where I realise that I need to land on my fingertip if I want. Whoops, and that's again. You have to be really careful with that. And if you do try and play on your fingertip, sometimes you just slide off. So occasionally, I do realise that. And again, I probably wouldn't play this with my little finger. If I needed a particular sound, that a flat finger. Again, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. I'm not going to go into this too much. This is for a different video. But whether you land with a flat finger or on your fingertip and how you stroke it afterwards, you get different tones, you get different sounds. And there's going to be an occasional time where I jump and want a very particular tone and I'll land on the fingertip. But, for the purposes of this video, that is so rare that you're going to need to do that. And again, experiment. All of the things that I'm going to teach you in this very comprehensive video, these are things for you to experiment with. Don't just do them blindly. And, like something that I point out to all my students, whenever I'm teaching technique in this kind of way, which is not intuitive, which is like, I recommend you use this motion, this shape, all this kind of stuff. There's always going to be exceptions, and just bear that in mind. There's always going to be times where you might want to break these rules. But for me, it's a good rule. Land diagonally with your finger, diagonally across a black note, but there will be times when you don't want that sound. And so, but just, you're going to want to experiment. And when I was playing around with this, there's not that many times. So, don't worry about that too much. Now, you might also want to think about this on black notes. Say I'm jumping from D to D, from D to D. So black notes are much harder. White notes, jumping from D to D, white notes. White notes are much, much harder to jump reliably for this reason, because a black note, you just whack your finger diagonally across it. So, but even a black note, when I land, I'm still kind of diagonally across it. Again, I don't know how well you can see that. You can probably see that my finger is going diagonally across. What I'm not doing is like this or right on the fingertip. I'm kind of on the fingertip. It kind of looks a bit like this when I land. It's not like that. It's more like that. And it's kind of diagonal. So what I'm doing, I'm right on the key edge. And the more on the key edge you can get, the more diagonal you can be. The further in you go, you're just going to start mashing the other key down. If you come right to the key edge, you can actually hit that note by having your finger going diagonally across it. So you can see that's, I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to see that's diagonal. And it's okay on on an acoustic piano or a good digital piano with weighted keys that you can kind of hit some of the other notes, and it's okay because they're not going to sound. This doesn't work if you have a keyboard with non-weighted keys, as I discovered recently when I bought myself some keyboards to start looking at electronic keyboard syllabuses. And I realized, oh my God, I'm mashing keys down everywhere because I'm used to finding my way around and brushing against other notes when I land. Well, you can't do that if you don't have weighted keys. But as long as you've got weighted keys, you can kind of brush a little bit with this note. So it's okay to have a diagonal note with the white note. But this is something else to experiment with. Experiment even with white keys. And here my thumb is diagonal. My thumb is diagonal, and maybe ever so slightly would brush the other key next to it. But this is just something to experiment with. Diagonal placements of fingers, sometimes on the black notes, grabbing a giant chunk of it so that you just can't miss it. And then the next point, I already kind of alluded to this, is the more that you can play on the key edge, the better control you're going to have. One of the reasons for this, and I spoke about this in a previous video on common mistakes that amateurs make, this is basically the concept that keys are like levers. And so say I'm playing this middle C, and you can think of middle C as this is the same as me pressing that. It is a lever. Somewhere deep into the piano, there is a fulcrum, the fulcrum here, around which it pivots. And then the further away from the fulcrum, the pivot point, the further away you play, the more control you're going to have over that key and over that note. So that is one very important reason why we want to play our notes here and not in here. Now, other reasons for this, with the white notes, the further in you go, you've got less space for your fingers, but especially once you get to the black note, you just want to be near the edge. But also, there's less chance of you hitting the other notes when you've got your diagonal placement of the finger. So as I jump down, the further to the key edge I am, the easier it is for me to hit that note. If I start going here, it just feels harder. Anyway, so I'm not going to go massively into that, but hopefully that should be fairly obvious. So this is a very, very, very important one. And what I notice, I can't remember how much I spoke about this in my previous video on psychology, but what I have noticed, and I've not seen anybody talk about this, this is something that I've noticed and to me is so clear, so obvious, but I've never seen anybody talk about this. And this is that when people are in the narrow focus state that I think I touched on the last time, there's a little bit of insecurity, or there's impatience, or there's this sense of striving and staring. The left brain hemisphere state as well, if you like, there'll be a link above and a link below to the video that I did on brain hemispheres. And when we're in the left brain hemisphere state, or anxious, or insecure, or overstriving, or all of these any of these things can trigger it, and we stare, what happens is that our wrists lock up. Our wrists just become tense, and they do not move. I think they move a little bit like this. They can move a little bit up and down, not a huge amount, and they certainly don't rotate, and they certainly don't do the lateral shifting. So lateral is just basically side to side. Now, when I showed this lateral movement to my students, hopefully you can see that my wrist is straight as I'm demonstrating that. So I'm basically going left and right, 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 left and right. I'm showing you this in all dimensions. What this is not, it's not like we go up and down. And the way that a lot of my students then think they get it is they move their hand down and then do that. That is a completely different motion. If you think about a wrist rotation like this, and I know it's really a forearm rotation, but from now on, it's just a wrist rotation because it feels like it comes from your wrist. So if you think about a wrist rotation that looks like that, and then you move your hand down, it's still a wrist rotation. This just moving purely from side to side, where your hand is, your wrist is straight, and then you go left and right, that is different to moving your hand down and then rotating it. It's a completely different thing. So lateral is left and right, okay? So this is something that so few of my students do. And this is something that if you have strong interoception of your wrist as you are practicing, you'll naturally start to feel that you can do these things. So let's say that I jump down this same jump from C to C. What I have to do for this to feel comfortable, this is a normal straight wrist when I play the middle C with my left hand thumb. As I move down, I have to do a lateral shift to my left with my wrist, because if I don't, that means I've got to move all the way further down. If I stretch, yeah, I also have to do that little bit of a lateral shift to my left, just to make it that little bit easier. It's like, imagine, I'm going to demonstrate it here. I'm here. Oops, sorry. I'm here. I want to get to, I'm here. I want to get to over here. I've already recorded this tutorial a few times. One of the times I did it, I kept demonstrating everything here. And when I watched it back, I was like, oh my God, no one can see anything. So I'm going to try and be a lot more clear in how I'm demonstrating this. So if you're trying to go from here to over here, hopefully it's obvious that if I want to get here, I've got to make this movement with my wrist, because if I don't, I've just got to move further. But this lateral shift will get me there. And, remember that good technique is the laziest way to do what we want. Now, sometimes what this means is that we have to sacrifice something in one part of the body. It's almost like you add up what every single part of the body does, and once you've added it all up, you basically get the total score of how much effort that's taken. Because I think to a lot of people, this lateral shift feels like a little bit of effort, but it's a lot less effort than moving your whole arm. Moving your whole arm is way more effort than just moving your wrist a little bit. That hopefully should be kind of obvious. But this wrist is not a thing that most people are comfortable moving, because it just locks up. And locking up is also something that happens when we are just not interoceptive, when we're not feeling what's going on in our body. The moment we feel what's going on in our body, it's like it lubricates, it all starts to move. So these lateral shifts of the wrist are so important. And then you can add maybe a little bit of rotation as well as that lateral shift. And then it sort of becomes like what some people call wrist circles. But I find it more useful to kind of break it down and think about lateral movements and rotations, and then you can kind of start doing them at the same time. And again, this is just something to experiment with. This especially becomes important when we are playing. Let's say I want to jump to a chord which has loads of black notes. So okay, yeah, I'm going to put the sheet music above. But let's say that I'm jumping in the second bar of this Chopin from this chord to this chord to this chord. What a lot of my students are going to do, these are fine, these are fine, these are fine. And then, because they don't want to move their wrist laterally, I see this so often, they don't want to move their wrist laterally, the thumb, so I'm here, and now my thumb, which is here, has got to get all the way over to this note. And what so many of them do is they just move their whole hand in so that they don't have to move their wrist. Look at where my second and third fingers are. They're mashed right up against the piano. I'm going to demonstrate this here in a minute. So it's like here, here. And so that they don't move their wrist, they have to move their whole hand to there. Oh my God, no. It's here, here. And the lateral movement to get the thumb so that all the fingers are as near to the key edge as you can get. Now, the second and third fingers, they're not right at the key edge because that's impossible, but they're not mashed right up against the piano either. So let me demonstrate this here. It's like I'm jumping here, and then here's my thumb. The note that I want to get to, so here's the white note, and then the note I want is like here. Look where my thumb is. So most people are going to have to move their whole hand all the way into there. That's ridiculous. You want to go here, here. Here's the black note. You go like that. Can you see? That makes so much sense, right? That should just be self-evident that that's just what you do. And it's not a rotation, it's a lateral shift. That hopefully just should be really clear. But yet, most amateurs just don't do that because they're not feeling into their wrist. This is why I spent ages in the first video talking about interoception and, you know, all the other stuff that I spoke about. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to have that ability to just feel that that is what you do. It's and hopefully now that should just be kind of obvious. And so, you know, a lot of jumps. And not just jumps to one note, they're jumps to chords. And or even if it is just one note, you still want to experiment with rotations and lateral shifts, but especially chords, and especially chords that have black notes. You're probably going to want to do a lot of these kinds of lateral shifts. So related to that, the next point is that when you're jumping anywhere that has more than one note, you're going to want to really morph into the shape of what you need before you get there. So let's take that exact same point. Let's take that exact same. It's no point moving there and then suddenly trying to get your fingers in the right place. It's too late. As I'm moving, I'm gradually getting my fingers in the right place so that when I land, it is ready. So let me show you this here in slow motion. I'm here. And again, notice that going from the little finger, I'm here. As I move, the in-between is getting my little finger and my second finger. I'm playing it with little finger and second finger to then get my thumb ready for the next note. So I'm going from there. I don't know why I'm shaking. I'm shaking holding up my hand. I'm not shaking down here. Anyway, so I'm going from there. As I'm in the middle of moving, as I'm moving from here to here, I'm already stretching my fingers to the right gap as I'm on my way. So I'm here, I stretch, and I land with that right distance. What I don't do is play, move, then stretch and get it. That's hopefully that's obvious that that's just going to be a waste of time and just slow you down. So it's almost like as you play this note, you're already imagining the feeling that you're moving to, so that when you get there, you've got it. And then the next one, as I move there, I'm slowly morphing to the next chord. And everything moves very, very, very slowly. So it's like I'm here, I gradually move, and then I gradually move like that. So there's no sudden quick jerks. It's not like they're suddenly jerk there, suddenly jerk there. Everything just happens slowly and slowly morphs in that kind of way. So here, slowly morph, slowly morph. I could have maybe morphed that better. There we go, something like that. So hopefully that should kind of seem self-evident, but you know, again, it's another thing that I see a lot of my students do. They'll be just quick, sudden, jerky motions. If anything, practice it super slowly so that everything moves at the slowest possible speed. Again, remember, good technique is the laziest way to get the sound that you want. The laziest way for me to get from here to here to here is to literally move in the slowest way possible, so that once I go, if you slow it down, every finger is moving in the slowest way possible. There's no quick, sudden, jerky motions. So again, another thing to experiment with. And a lot of these things, they're things I could probably break down. Each individual one I could break down into so much detail, but this is very comprehensive, and I'm just basically throwing all of them at you in one video, and then maybe doing deeper dives on these and going down the rabbit holes further down the line. So another one that I spoke about, that this is a whole video that I did about this in the most common mistakes that amateur pianists make, which is the belief that we play with our fingers. And most of the time, sometimes we play with our fingers, but 99% of the time we really don't. We're really just, our fingers are in a relaxed, curled shape, curved, but relaxed. And when they land, it's like they are a Roman stone arch. That they have a shape that takes the weight without any effort. You know, like Roman bridges that can still take the weight of loads of trucks and lorries and cars that go over them. And it's just purely the shape of how that takes all the weight. And it's like that with the fingers. When we land with a nice strong shape, and I don't mean strength with muscles, I mean the shape just takes the weight, then we can play with the wrist. The wrist can do the motion, or the forearm can do the motion from the wrist. And that, to be honest, is like really how I play most of the time. And then some metacarpal as well. So metacarpal is moving from your knuckle joint and not the distal joint. So when I say that don't play with the fingers, what I really mean is don't play with the two distal joints, the two joints nearest to the fingertip. This is one of the most common things I see people do over and over again. Now, I guess a little bit when I do big jumps, I might pull a little bit with these joints, but really it's much more my arm, my forearm from the elbow, the wrist, maybe just a tiny bit from the finger, but it's really the arm. And I think what a lot of people will do is they'll try and pull it with the finger. And this just, like, for one thing, these joints are very, very weak. So you'll never get a decent sound when you pull with these. But also it just feels clumsy. It's awkward. It can lead to injuries. It's just easier. Again, it's just lazier to just use gravity, use your wrist, use your arm. Maybe a little bit your wrist, so when I land, I can rotate and use that kind of thing a little bit. But just you are not going to do well trying to pull with your distal joints, and this applies to pretty much everything, not just jumps, but every aspect of technique, but especially as well when you're jumping to a chord. So a lot of people, when they're jumping to a chord, they'll try and pull with their fingers, and this means that your weakest fingers, basically you won't hear your weakest fingers, and it's just a lot of effort, and it just doesn't sound good, and it's difficult. So anyway, don't play with your fingers. And also another really common mistake that people do when they do jumps, they don't like to move away from the keys. And I was like this, even when I was, I think even right up to master's level, when I did my master's degree, I remember my teacher saying to me, bring your hands away from the keys. And I really didn't want to, because there's a feeling that if you move them away, you're going to be lost when you come back. But, this is such an integral part of my technique now. It's very, very important, because the further away you move from the keys, you're more relaxed, and you can just use gravity to pull back. But also, for other reasons, I'm going to include a clip that I talked about in another video. But, if you think about this, if I make an arc shape and then land, so an arc, it's like like a rainbow, like this kind of shape, as opposed to staying completely flat, which might feel safer and easier. But, well, do you know what? I'm just going to put up a little clip of me talking about this from a different tutorial video that I did on Over the Bars, which is one of my most watched videos, because it's got all these insane leaps and jumps everywhere. In fact, first of all, let me just play you a little clip of me playing Over the Bars. And then this is basically a clip of me talking about how you do these kinds of jumps when I did a tutorial for that piece. So the next thing that I recommend, most people really want to hug the keys. They want to stay very close to the keys and move very horizontally. So they move very horizontally like this. But if you think about it, and this is going to feel maybe completely counterintuitive to some of you, if you come up like this, it's actually a lot less effort. Because if you experiment, go sideways. If you go sideways, you've got to suddenly stop. It's like you speed up and you slam the brakes on when you get to where you want to be, which takes so much muscular effort in your arm. Whereas if you come up and you form an arc, think about if you're chucking some scrumpled up paper in the bin in the far distance of the room. From the moment it leaves your hand, you're kind of going to know if it's going to land in the bin or not. It has a trajectory. And it's like this, like you want to leave the key knowing that you're going to reach the note. But the good thing about it is, if you come up and go, oh, it's not the right trajectory, you've got a little bit of time to fine tune it before you come back down. Let me try it with the right hand. So if I just try and I'm gonna have to overcome some habits here. I'm gonna try and do it without the arc and just staying very close horizontally to the keys. Oh my God, my whole upper arm is tense because it takes a lot of muscular effort to control that. And it's, yeah, so it just feels awkward. I can feel that it's nowhere near as accurate. It feels tense and unnecessarily stressful, whereas this, it's a lot more relaxed. It's as relaxed as it can be. So, I mean, that's exaggerating a bit. You want to find what's comfortable with a little bit of an arc. That's me having a comfortable arc. But this, oh, that's going to be a nightmare. Don't do that. So hopefully you're convinced, because, you know, so many students are kind of scared of moving away from the keys, but hopefully I've kind of convinced you with that is something worth practicing. Now, the next point is it's really important to relax your hand during the jump. So there's a bit of a contradiction here, because earlier I said that you want to start morphing into the shape as you jump. Sometimes that's true. And sometimes if you're just playing constant octaves everywhere, if I'm playing, I don't know, an octave scale. I'm not just going to keep my fingers in exactly that same shape as I go up. What I do, and if I slow it right down, it feels something like this. And if I show you in this position, it's going to look something like this. Da, 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 da. And if I show you here, it's like da, da. Now, because I'm relaxed, it doesn't have time to shift completely into this relaxed state, because it's not like I'm actively pulling my fingers inwards. It's like I play and then I relax, play, and then relax. And relaxation doesn't just happen bang and your hand has come in. It's just, it's literally, I've just relaxed the muscles. But because it's fast, you don't see that the fingers come in. But it really does feel like I play and I relax, and then I play and I relax, and I play and I relax. And this is so important. Now, there are times where, say I'm jumping down, I'm jumping from this C to that C. Actually here, I'm not really relaxing. I'm very relaxed. I'm very relaxed when I play the first C. I'm not already stretched. I'm here, my hand is completely relaxed, and then I stretch out. I stretch out for it. But the moment that I land, I immediately relax. Now, it might look like I'm stretched, but I haven't. I've relaxed. So again, this is another thing, that you don't just take everything completely on board and you just, apply it rigidly. You experiment and you see what works for you. But one thing that I will say is that most of my students think that they don't like the sensation of stretching with their hand. They think that this is tension. They think this feels like tension. They think this is uncomfortable. And, it takes a while, but there is a difference between, like an awkward, like stretching and everything feels awkward. Now, imagine a cat that's woken up from a nap and stretches backwards. And hopefully you all have this idea of a cat waking up and stretching. Dogs do this as well, but I mean cats especially. Or, I think most of us can imagine when we become adults, we tend never to stretch, and stretching can feel really good. But I think as adults, we generally don't choose to stretch, do we? But, if you do yoga and stretches, if we're working out and exercising, it can feel good. Or something that I know can feel good sometimes. Say you're stretching for something on the top shelf, something super high, a book on a super high bookshelf, and you stretch and you stretch. That doesn't necessarily have to feel horrible. It can feel like a nice stretch. When it feels horrible is if you over tense and you hold on to it. But there actually is a word, and I'm going to have to look it up and put it below once I've Googled it, because there is a word, a completely obscure word in the English language, which is like the pleasure of a good stretch, and I'm going to have to Google it. But when we stretch with our hands, there's the potential for this to feel really pleasurable and really nice, and not just like but I don't know why, because for me it's such a natural thing that I stretch and it feels good. It feels like a nice thing to stretch down, and you don't hold it. It's not tension. It's not tense. It would be tense if you held it, but these stretches should feel nice and healthy. So yeah, stretches are great. And then something else that is worth bearing in mind. Let's say that I'm no longer going from middle C down to the very bottom C, but let's say I'm going from this C to this C. So this is 2 octaves. Most of you should know what an octave feels like. And if you don't worry. It's something that comes like when you become intermediate level. So, if you're not quite intermediate level, don't worry about this. This is something for slightly more advanced people. Don't worry, but keep listening, because all the other steps are going to be really useful. So hopefully everyone knows what an octave feels like. Anyone should be able to find a note with their thumb and immediately just play the octave below with their little finger. This is just something that we internalize. Really important. So we all know what this feels like. And then if you think about the note that we're trying to get to, the octave above it that we're playing with our thumb is the same note that we're actually playing with our little finger. So let me demonstrate this way. We want to go from here to here, but this note is the same. So we're trying to get from there to here. So really, we're just doing this. So if I want to jump from here to here, it's the same as me doing this. So if I get a sense of where my little finger goes on that octave and just put my thumb there and then stretch an octave, that is a really easy way of sort of thinking about how I make that jump. So this can be useful, say, if we're sight reading, if I'm sight reading something. Yeah, okay, so let's say in the Chopin Nocturne, say I want to get from here down to this note here. So my little finger is on G, and I want to move down to this note. I happen to be able to stretch a tenth, kind of, but even if I couldn't stretch a tenth, I would be able to stretch an octave or a ninth. And then that's not that far away from that G. Let's see. So I want to go from here. I want to go from the B flat, the E flat, and the G. I can sort of feel where my little finger would go. I imagine an octave down from that, and then it's just there. So, it's a little bit tricky to explain, but I'm going to have the sheet music and I'm going to show you here. I'm here, and I imagine my little finger on the G. I imagine the stretch down, and then I just go that little bit further that takes me to the D. And so a lot of the time, if you watch some of the performance videos that I've recorded in the past where I'm reading from sheet music, you will literally see me move around the piano I'll sort of measure and move around and measure stuff. I don't even realize that I'm doing it. So hopefully I was kind of clear with that, and I'll try and put as many visual aids as I can. So I'm playing this chord. I imagine my little finger. I imagine a stretch from that note, and then I just go a little further. So there, stretch, it's there. So I'm sight reading. I imagine the G, I imagine I go down, and it's just a way to kind of start navigating your way around the piano. So another thing that I've realized that I do, and to be honest, I never even sort of was aware that I did this. I think most professionals don't even realize that they do this. I've never seen anybody discuss this as a way of a strategy for being able to do octaves. But let's say that I'm jumping from D to D, D to D, D to D. Something that I realize that I do when I watch back my videos of like the top down, one way of knowing that I'm in the right place, I'm going to really slow this down. As I jump down, and I am doing an arc shape, but as I get nearer, I'm using the other fingers to brush against the black notes, which starts to give me a sense of where I am. And sometimes I'll even brush against, so I'm trying to go for this note here. Sometimes I'll even brush against them here, and I'll go, that's where I am. Because I feel if there are like 3 black notes, or there's like a big gap, I'll go, that must be where the B flat is. So I'm sort of brushing against the black notes to get a feeling of the geography of the piano, like they're landmarks, if you like. And so I'm like, I'm here. And then when I land, my 4th finger bumps into the E flat and goes, I'm there. So it's like, imagine that this is the note E flat, and I want to hit the D that's here. So what I might do if I have a big jump is I'll jump over, and my 4th finger will lightly brush it, and I'll go, I'm there. And I think most people will never really think about this. Now, I don't recommend that you're too deliberate about this. I do not recommend you jump, you deliberately with your 4th finger go, there's the E flat, and then you play the D, because that is not what's going on. It's more that what's going on. Again, like I was saying before, I'm very interoceptive. I'm feeling all the sensations in my hand. There's also the thing that I was speaking about in the last episode, episode 1, of perceiving the piano as a 3-dimensional thing, perceiving it in a visuospatial way. And part of perceiving it as a 3-dimensional thing in a visuospatial way is you realize that if you're moving to the D, there is this 3-dimensional E flat that's there. And if you're interoceptive and feeling everything and perceiving the piano as a 3-dimensional object rather than as a 2-dimensional map that you view from above, you'll naturally just go, there's this 3-dimensional E flat here that my 4th finger is just going to subconsciously brush against, and you're going to get it. Now, I point this out because I guess there's a danger that people are going to overthink this. You don't want to focus on this. This is not a thing that you think about, because then it just becomes another sort of left brain thing that you're thinking, right, here's the finger goes to that note, pushes against it, then I play with the little finger. You're completely missing the point of that, which is it's a right-brained, embodied, felt, natural thing. That part of where D is it happens to be next to this 3-dimensional black note that sticks out, but you don't focus on it, you don't over focus on it in like a narrow focus left brain, one thing at a time. It's just part of the physical thing of what you're doing. It's just one very subtle small thing to be aware of as you're doing all the other stuff. Do not just turn this into one thing that you focus on. So then I'd also like to talk about some other points which sort of deserves a category of its own, and these are eye movements and visual techniques. So I find that the way our eyes move can become just as much a muscle memory as what our fingers do, what our wrist does, what our hands do. So I'm sure, everyone knows the experience that you play and you get the habits of where all your fingers go. And if your teacher says, oh, use a different finger there, or that's a wrong note, it's very, very difficult sometimes to change it. It just becomes muscle memory. The eyes can do something very, very similarly. If you're playing and you're always looking in the same place in the same kind of way, that will become a habit that is so difficult to change. And what I've discovered, the more that I try and get really, really difficult like jumps right at the extreme end of what I can do, is that I have to choreograph my eyes. Now, this might sound like a contradiction of what I was saying in the previous video, where I was talking about it's really important not to be too visual with our jumps and to feel everything more. Now, having said that, I do want to point out that vision can be one of the most important things that we use when we're jumping, but there is a very, very important caveat to this. And I'm going to make this pretty much a rule that doesn't have many exceptions. And this rule is that you do not want to look at your finger at the moment that the key gets pressed down. So if I'm jumping from here to here, it's very, very rare that I will want to be looking at the C at the moment that the key gets pushed down. One reason, I guess, is that usually the leaps and jumps are in the left hand. And if I'm looking at the left hand at that moment, that is taking away from the thing I actually want to be listening to, which is going to be in the right hand. So, for example, this is something that I was talking about in the last video, where I was saying that most people play Chopin like this. And basically that happens because I'm thinking really hard about the left hand and looking at the left hand. And so if you're looking at the left hand, especially with the big jumps, so let's say at this moment here, the right hand note moves to an F, which has a lot of emotion because it's a non-chord tone. So it's a very important note that we don't just want to be. We've completely lost that really important note. Now, if we play and then look at that E flat, it's almost impossible to really, really, truly listen to that note in the right hand, which is so easy. We don't really need to think about it because it's all it's da 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 da. It's all under the fingers. We don't need to think about it. So I cannot overemphasize this enough. What we want to do, and you do need to look. Of course we need to look and see where that E flat is. I'm not really saying that we're, although if I'm sight reading, let's see, would I be able to play this? No, actually I could sight read it without looking down at my fingers, but most people, it's fine. It's fine to need to look down for that note. But what you need to do, and you may need to practice choreographing your eyes to do this, and this may be a pain in the neck. You may really not want to do this, but I can't emphasize enough. You might want to choreograph. At this point, you glance for that E flat. So as you move down, you glance with your eyes, and the moment you play, you're not looking there. And that means you can really listen. You can really listen to that note in the right hand, because if you're staring at something with your eyes, that means that attention is taking your ears away from listening. So I'll glance and then really listen to that note. And what that means is that for that brief moment in time that you play that note, you're not actually looking anywhere in particular. And this is something I'm going to have to talk about in a whole different video, because basically if we're really listening, our eyes just tend to disengage and we have a soft gaze, and we're actually not really visually aware of what we're looking at. And this is really what you need when you want to bring out an important note. Now, this is way too much to go into in this video, but what it does mean is you want to choreograph a little glance and then Let me see actually when I would do this. So I start moving down. I glance when my little finger's around here, around B flat. I'll glance very quickly and then take my eyes away again. Glance, glance. And they are only glances. They're little cheeky glances. One of the analogies that I use for the kinds of glances that you do, say you're crossing the road. You're crossing the road and there's a curb, or I don't know what are curbs called. Are they called curbs in America? But the little raised bits. Maybe they're also called curbs. But so or sidewalk. You're crossing from the sidewalk, and there's a curb. So you're crossing, and you don't want to trip over the curb. How many of you will cross the road and stare at your feet and stare at the curb to make sure that you don't trip over? Almost nobody. What you'll do is you'll glance so briefly that you don't even realize that you're doing it. And then you step, and it's like this. It's like we're crossing the road, we glance. I'm barely even aware that I'm doing it. It's just a quick little glance. But it is not the equivalent of crossing the road and staring and going, let me lift my foot so I can make it onto the pavement sidewalk, Glance. Glance. So that your focus is here in the right hand. Glance here in the right hand. Here in the right hand. Now, somewhere you are allowed to look is your right hand as you play those notes. So as I play the F, I'm looking at the F. I look at the E flat, because that is a really nice way of really listening to those notes that you're playing. So this is really important, and this becomes really, really useful if you're playing really complicated stuff. So in the Rachmaninoff Little Red Riding Hood Etude Tableau, this was the only way that I could find that I could get these ridiculous jumps. And I'm just going to have a very quick clip here just to remind you. I did have it in part one, but just a very quick clip of me playing that here. And basically, this was so out of my comfort zone. I'd never been able to play stuff with jumps that difficult. And I found that I had to practice the exact choreography of my eyes with these little glances just before I got there. There's also a piece that I'm playing at the moment. I've been learning this Piazzolla Libertango. It's the Yamamoto version that I ordered in from Japan. And there's this little bit near the end, which, most of it's not too bad, but there's this bit near the end. So there's this bit here with... Now, I guess it's not too bad, but I realised that I really do have to practice if I want it bulletproof, if I want it absolutely bulletproof. So I'm jumping from here, and then from here, from this position, both hands have to play here at exactly the same time. That's not super straightforward. So I realised that what I need to do, I jump, I look at my left hand, look at my right hand. And it's okay to look at my right hand there, because then it has the melody in that point. That's okay. So, look. So, I'm not really ready to play this under the pressure of being recorded. This is just something that I'm still in the process of learning. But it's a very quick glance to the left and then a look to the right. So, it helps to sometimes be aware of physically where you're looking and of making sure that they really are glances. Because if you're not careful, if you're looking and then you keep looking at the moment that the finger gets pushed down. This is something I'm going to talk about in a future video, because in many ways, this is what happens in the left brain hemisphere state. No, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole on this one, but basically, I will be talking about this. For the moment, take my word for it. If you start looking at notes at the moment they get pressed down, this is very dangerous psychological territory, and it engages parts of your brain that generally aren't very useful. And I want to emphasize that a lot of the time, when I'm practicing difficult stuff, sometimes I just don't think about this stuff because these jumps can just start to get a little bit overwhelming. And I don't even realize that I'm starting to use my eyes in ways that just aren't ideal, because sometimes I think as pianists, we just don't think about it. So, this is something really worth consciously choreographing and practicing. Let me talk about it just ever so slightly, just a little bit more. When we feel under pressure, when we're nervous, when we're anxious, our nervous systems kick in. And I was talking about this just very, very quickly, at the beginning of this episode too. What happens is that stress and tension pull us into a narrow focus where we stare at individual things. And this staring at individual things gets really heightened if we jump somewhere and stay looking at that note, because that can be quite stressful, the act of jumping to a note. If we stay staring at it, this just amplifies our nerves and amplifies that we're not in a good nervous system state. So I'm just going to drop that in there. So the next point, sometimes we just need to memorize, because sometimes if we're reading from sheet music, reading from the sheet music here is fine. But generally that's fine. I don't really need to memorize all of that. There's the occasional moment where I'm reading from the music and I'm just thinking, no, there's just too much looking down. This is just something I'm going to have to memorize. So, for example, about a month ago, was it? I recorded all the new Grade 8 ABRSM pieces. This is for 2025. And so I know one of the pieces that's going to be really popular is the Scott Joplin rag. Is it the Maple Leaf rag that's in that? And so I remember there were just a few bars. Was it about 4 bars in there that I just thought, no, I'm just going to have to memorize this. So here's the clip of those bars that I just decided I'm just going to memorize those 4 bars. And then I played you a little bit of Over the Bars before, and that was just something that in the end, I thought it's just going to be far easier for me just to memorize the whole piece than to read from the music and, have to keep looking down and looking at my hands. So, just bear in mind, there are times where it's just going to be easier to memorize. And, I'm not saying you should memorize the whole thing, but maybe ask yourself, where is it that I just absolutely have to memorize? And, another thing is that if you're reading from sheet music, I cannot recommend highly enough that you might want to go through it and think to yourself, do I need to look down here? Do I need to look down? And maybe just think, okay, I need to look down. I can look down there. What you don't want to do is just, like so many of my students do, and just keep looking down all the time. So here, a little glance here is okay. And now here, I don't need to look. So what a lot of my students will do is they'll look and then they'll look again. You don't need to look there. You do not need to look. Because I guess, there can be in the nervous system, they're like, there's a jump. Oh, I need to look again. I need to look again. I need to look. And there's this constant looking up and down. Just figure out where you need to look. And then the rest of the time, don't look down. Just don't look down at your hands. Now, again, if you don't have interoception, and proprioception, but I'm going to talk about proprioception another time. But I think most people, if they have interoception, they're already going to be aware roughly where their arms are. That's what proprioception is. Proprioception is a sense of knowing where your parts of your body are in relation to all the other parts with your eyes closed without having to look. So if you're already feeling all the physical sensations, you should already have a good sense of where your limbs are and where your fingers are in space. So, if you have interoception, you don't really need to keep staring down at your fingers. You've got the notes there. You've got all of that. So memorization can be really useful sometimes, but this is not an excuse. So, those brief bars that I played you earlier, I would not have then suddenly just been staring at my hands and staring at the notes as they got pushed down. It is not suddenly an opportunity to just be staring at everything in that tight, narrow, tense, stressed out focus as you play. You still want a soft gaze, a soft focus. So the next section basically covers various practice strategies. This practice strategy, I saw Graham Fitch illustrate this in the video. I really like this practice strategy. I came across this years ago, like 8 years ago, when I was getting back into piano playing, and I found it was pretty helpful. So let's get back to jumping from the middle C down to the C at the bottom of the piano. What this particular technique is, and this technique goes against a lot of the other things I was saying before. So it's staying horizontally very, very near to the keys. It's not moving in an arc, and it's sort of looking a lot. And what you do, you play the C, and then what you do, you make sure that your hands are very quiet. So sometimes people talk about quiet, not just with sound, but with physical sensation. So the opposite of quiet is like twitching. It's twitching. It's like impatience. It's like the muscles are impatient. So I play the middle C and my hand is quiet. There's no twitching. There's no thinking about where I want to be. I'm here and I'm relaxed. I'm not impatiently thinking I need to go there. It's just quiet, completely relaxed. I'm not in my head thinking I need to go there, I need to go there. It's just completely silent. Then I think about I want to go there. And then I'm going to move so fast that it feels like I'm just suddenly there. It feels like there was no in between. I'm not thinking, how do I get there? I'm thinking, I'm just suddenly there. And this is really important. You do not play the note. You get ready to play the note. You want so I'm getting my little finger on the C. So I'm going to jump down so fast. It's like there was no in between. Oh, and I'm on the D. So I'm not quite on the right note. So now, because I jumped down and my goal was not to play it, I don't play it. Now, back to the C. If I end up on the right note, I will then play it, but only after a gap. So you don't want to jump down and then just try and play it. So this is going to be a real test of most people's impatience, because almost everyone that I show this to, they're like, you can see their fingers are twitching. They're like, no, you just have to calm it right down. You separate it. You play this completely different thing. You stop. This is a completely different section. It's like a new chapter. You don't even think about it. Now you think about going. Still no twitching though. I could feel a little bit of twitching, anticipating what most of my students would do. You just imagine you're here, and then you're just suddenly magically going to be there. Oh, if I played, I just play a little bit of that B by mistake. So I'm here, completely relaxed. I can feel it twitching, so completely relaxed. And then, I overcompensated back towards the D. And also, because I'm demonstrating, with a video, I guess I'm overthinking a little bit as well. If I think about the physical sensation, but I don't want to overthink it. I'm just here. Well, yes. So my little finger's there. Now I can play. So I'm here. Oh, I could feel the twitching a bit. Kind of, but I'm not, because it's slightly a little bit on the D. So I'm here. I can feel it twitching a bit. I'm here. Relax, I'm here, relax. I guess a little bit of me is ever so slightly tense and nervous presenting to camera. So I'm here, can feel a little bit of tension, but that's okay. And then, not there. And then, too far. And then, not quite. Yeah, I'm not getting this today. There it is. So basically, if you keep practicing this, after a while, you're just going to get this. And this is so useful. Now, I've got to emphasize, you do not actually want to jump in this way. This is not actually how you jump. This is more so that your brain, your nervous system, your body just learns what this gap feels like. Now that I do this, it actually does feel easier, but it's more like your brain is just learning what that gap feels like. But you are not actually making the jump in that way. So, if you do this, it's so important that you're completely wrecking it. If you then immediately jump and you get then, and then you just play the wrong note. You have to play completely relaxed, no twitching. Then it's not like how you get there. It's not a slow move. It's just one moment you're here, and then suddenly you're just there. You don't play unless you're in the right place, and then you play. So that is so useful. That helped me loads. Now, another thing that can be really useful is a sense of juggling, a sense of just keeping everything in what's called working memory. Working memory is the part of the brain that can keep track of, I think, up to 5 things at the same time. So let's say that I'm playing this Chopin Nocturne left hand. What we have here are three different ranges. We've got this range, we've got this range, the chords that are around here, and then sometimes we've got one that's there. And actually that's only there once. Other than that, we're really just juggling two ranges. So we've got, let's call this range A, range B, range C, so this is B, A, B, A, B, A, B, this is back C, so this is range C. So we're juggling these different things. This is range A, range B, range C. So let me just go from the third beat where we're juggling here, here, here. So here, here, here. Now, if we're feeling really interoceptive, we notice how this feels. We pay attention to all the sensations of where this is. We come up here, but we don't forget what that felt like. So when I go down, I just go back to literally the memory of where I just was, but just a little bit further down. So it's like if I do this and just play this over and over in the loop, this over and over in the loop, I don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. It's not like I'm jumping here, then I go, oh, where was that? Oh, it's there. Oh, where was I? I was here. Oh, where was that? It's not like I have a goldfish memory. I start to learn. I start to remember what this feels like. It's a memory. It's a memory of what it feels like to go in between them. And then I just go to almost where I was, but there. And then almost where I was, but changing one of the notes. And then I did remember being there, but down to there. So hopefully you can see what I'm kind of getting at here. It is like juggling. You're keeping tabs of where everything is. So it's like you've got point A and you've got point B. And you're just going backwards and forwards. A, B, A, B, A, B, A. And you're not just going, oh, I need to be here. Oh, God, I need to go back down there. Oh, God, where am I going? I need to be here. You just remember. So, I think this might be really worth consciously deepening your interoception into juggling between these things so that you're not just panic jumping. You already know what that felt like. So, yeah, hopefully I don't need to explain that too much more. Another thing that someone asked me this question on the part one of the video. Let's say that we've got these jumps. Let's say I'm going from the second beat. Do I want to jump down, make sure I've got it, then play it? Jump down, make sure I've got it, and then play it. Jump down, make sure I've got it. Or do I want to move slower? Do I want to move slowly and just play it as I get there? Now, I've got to basically say, there is basically no simple, short answer to this. A lot of this is basically, just experiment. But what I'll say, maybe just as a guideline, if you're reading from the sheet music and you're not really, really comfortable with the music, maybe we can get there slightly early and make sure we're in the right place. I don't think it's how I would do it. But if I was sight reading something that was a lot more difficult for me to sight read, and incidentally, this is a piece that I never learned, so it is kind of half sight reading. I could get there a little bit early. I prefer just to move slowly, just to move and land, because I'm less insecure about it. If I glance, if I use this opportunity now to glance, I know I'm going to get there. I know I'm going to be there. I know I'm going to be there. I know I'm going to make these things. So basically, most of the time, I don't choose, it's subconscious. But I subconsciously choose to move the slowest possible way and to get there only when I need to be there, because that's just better technique. It's the laziest way of getting the sound that you want. This just moving slowly enough It's just more relaxed. It's more musical. It's easier. But if I'm sight reading something difficult, I will get there a little bit early and just make sure I'm in the right place. Now, there is one exception to this. If I was playing and I want to play really loudly, I don't, but let's say I did. I'd get there a little bit early and then make sure I'm really going to be there on time. So then I can, because if I'm going to whack that note, I don't want it to be the wrong note. So, yeah, I get there early and then get ready to really go for it. So, I mean, I don't know if that's enough guidance, but really most of the time, try the slowest motion. But if you think there's a chance you're going to miss it, then get there earlier. But just try to use your eyes. Try to use your eyes better. So you just know. I glance at it, and by glancing at it, I know I'm going to get it. And I know just from all the other techniques and things I've been speaking about for, all of this 3 hours or whatever it's almost been. I just know from all those things I'm going to get it, so I don't have to panic. So, but basically mix and match. And try both, see how you get on with them. So I was also going to talk about octaves, but to be honest, I've run out of time. So I'm going to have to make a separate video at some point to do with octaves. And so let's stop it there for the moment and have a part 3 on octaves and jumps at some point. Now, I'm really, really disappointed with how many people watched my last video, part 1, because I think there's such good stuff in there. And, some of the comments that people have left, thank you everyone who's left the comments. There's been really lovely comments saying how useful this has been. I know this is useful because I've covered so much of the stuff that I teach to my students over and over again that I know they find really, really useful. So, I would really appreciate it because I put so much time and hard work and all the equipment. I've just bought new lighting. If you can help to support the channel by liking and subscribing and, click on the notification bell if you want to know when all the future tutorials are coming out. Also, I do have some spaces left for teaching online. If you're interested, there'll be details in the description below how to contact me. I love teaching online. Almost all my students are online at the moment. I myself decided to have a teacher for the first time in ages a couple of years ago, and I decided to go for an online teacher. And, I believe in it as a format to the point where I was having online lessons. Basically, I hope you enjoyed it. And go do some practice or go watch more of my videos. Take care. Goodbye. Enjoy yourselves. Bye, bye, bye.